Gentleman from Kentucky is recognized for whatever questions he may have for the panel.
Thank you, Chairman Cole. Ranking Member Thompson, were you chairman of the January 6th committee?
Yes,
And what was the purpose of that committee?
to look at the facts and circumstances that brought about the actions of January 6th and make recommendations as to Congress and that it would not happen again.
And so it included things up to January 6th and also including the day of January 6th.
That's correct.
Is it true that the Secret Service cell phone records were deleted for that day on January 6th?
I'm not certain that all of them. We had difficulty with getting some of them.
Was your investigation hindered in part by the deletion of those Secret Service text messages?
We could have had a better and more thorough report had we had access to all those records.
When did you discover those messages were deleted?
During the course of the investigation.
Who was the Secretary of Homeland Security at that time?
January,
No, when you discovered the messages were deleted.
Alejandro Mayorkas.
Secretary Mayorkas was the Secretary of Homeland Security when you found out those messages were deleted.
Yes, as best I can recollect.
Do you recollect making this statement with Ms. Cheney? And I'll ask to submit this for the record. It's a July 20th, 2022 statement by Thompson and Cheney on the United States Secret Service's response to the Select Committee subpoena. I won't read the whole thing, but here I believe you said, 4 House committees had already sought these critical records from the Department of Homeland Security before the records were apparently lost. Additionally, the procedure for preserving content prior to this purge appears to have been contrary to federal records retention requirements and may represent a possible violation of the Federal Records Act. The Select Committee is seeking additional Secret Service records as well. Every effort must be made to retrieve the lost data as well. Do you still believe there may have been a violation of the Federal Records Act?
Yes.
And when do you think these Secret Service records were deleted?
They were deleted when President Trump was in office. We found out about him later.
So here's a statement of Anthony Guglielmi, Chief of Communications for the United States Secret Service, on accusations of deleted text for DHS Inspector General. I asked unanimous consent to submit this for the record.
Without objection, so
And I
ordered.
also asked unanimous consent, if I forgot to do it, for the Thompson-Cheney statement.
Without objection, so ordered.
So here, this is from the Secret Service themselves. Now, I believe that, before I get into that, I believe there were 4 committees chaired by Democrats who asked for preservation of all communications, including electronic communications, the Secret Service on January 6th. This is relevant because the Secret Service works for Homeland Security, correct?
They're in the Homeland.
Yeah, they're in Homeland Security. Some people may think they're in Treasury, but after 9/11, they were transferred to Homeland Security. So here's what the Secret Service said about those records. It says that the OIG requested the communications on February 26th after the migration was well underway. The Secret Service notified DHS OIG of the loss of certain phones' data, but confirmed to OIG that none of the texts it was seeking had been lost in the migration. I think we later found out they were lost, but what he says is on February 26th, the migration was underway. Didn't say it was complete, said it was underway. Now, Secretary Mayorkas was confirmed on February 2nd. So this would have been 24 days after that the Secret Service themselves is saying they're still in the process of migrating. Now, what the Secret Service claimed is that they switched phones and phone providers and then deleted all of the old phones. But it seems, according to the Secret Service, that they were still in the process of doing that while Secretary Mayorkas was in charge of Homeland Security, which is the umbrella over the Secret Service. So, I forgot if I asked you, do you still think it appears that there may have been a violation of the Federal Records Act?
Well, the issue of that with the Secret Service came up when the IG was trying to get access to the record and did not tell us that he was trying to get access to the record. We found that out later in the investigation.
Who kept you from getting access?
Well, to be honest with you, a number of us wrote, 4 of us signed a letter asking for that information. But in reality, we were not afforded that opportunity to get it. But at the time we asked for it, the Trump administration was still there as president.
So did Secretary Mayorkas hold anybody accountable for the deletion of those records and those cell phone records?
I'm not aware of it.
Are you still trying to get them from Secretary Mayorkas?
Well, you know, our committee has disbanded.
So you're not interested in that and pursuing that any further. The fact that you said, I'm going to read your words back to you, appears to be contrary to the Federal Records retention requirements and may represent a possible violation of the Federal Records Act. I think if 4 committees of Congress gave a preservation notice and the Secret Service deleted those communications, that's obstruction of Congress. I think we should still be looking into that, regardless of when we found out about it, and frankly, regardless of who the president is. But it seems to me that Mayorkas hasn't done anything about this. And according to the Secret Service statement from 2022, it looks like they were still in the process of deleting these cell phone records when Mayorkas was secretary. I would hope that he would be as troubled about this as I am. Let me ask you, let me tie this back. Who is responsible on January 6th? Who was responsible for the health and well-being of the incoming vice president?
Of the incoming?
Incoming, this would be Senator Kamala Harris at the time. She was under the protection of them.
Well, obviously, Secret Service.
Correct, the Secret Service. So where was she on January 6th while all this was going on over at the Capitol?
I don't know.
Do you know there were pipe bombs allegedly present on January 6th?
I know there were 2 pipe bombs, one at the Democratic headquarters and one at the Republican.
So you're in charge of the entire investigation of what happened on January 6th and what led up to January 6th, and you don't know that the vice president was in the incoming vice president was in the DNC when that pipe bomb was sitting there.
I don't, you know, we did not, our investigation was looking at the facts and circumstances. We knew that there were pipe bombs. I'm sure the evidence will say she was wherever she is, but, you know, I'm trying to get to your point.
Okay, well, my point is, if this bomb had gone off just a few feet from her, this could have been the worst assassination since JFK. And I looked at your January 6th report, and can you tell me what you wrote about this pipe bomb and the fact that she was almost blown up that day?
The gentleman,
Not right now.
No, it's in the report in terms of the submission. It's not in the 850-page document.
So you guys did, your committee did investigate the pipe bomb or did not
No,
investigate
we-
the pipe bomb?
Well, I'm trying to figure out, we're not a criminal investigation. We are, you know, we were an oversight body looking at the facts and circumstances. We were not a criminal body to see who laid the bomb or anything like that.
Okay, I'll give you that, but here's, it seems like a lot of criminal indictments came out of your, the result of your investigation. But here's my concern. So we unearthed a video, I don't know if you've seen it, when that second pipe bomb is found. And the Secret Service, it's a videotape of the DNC, and a person who doesn't have a uniform on, we're told it's a Capitol Hill police officer, found that bomb, walked over to incoming Vice President Kamala Harris's detail, told them there was a pipe bomb. Now, I believe that to be true because I've since talked to the Capitol Police and talked to one of the people on the scene that day. They went over and told the Secret Service detail there was a pipe bomb there. On this video, about 4 minutes elapse before the Secret Service responds. This is why I'm interested. I know you were very interested at one point in the deletion of these Secret Service text messages, but this is why I am interested, and I would have thought the January 6th committee would have been interested in the two most threatening weapons that were present on January 6th that day. But what happens is a police officer without a uniform on, but must have been known as a police officer to the Secret Service, tells the Secret Service, there's a bomb over here. It takes them 4 minutes for the Secret Service to respond. It takes them 10 minutes to evacuate Kamala Harris, and this bomb is maybe 15 feet from the building that she's in. And this is why I wonder if you're still the least, bit curious about why Secretary Mayorkas has not followed up on the deletion of all these Secret Service texts. Does it bother you that they deleted them?
Well, it bothers me that we did not have access to all the tapes, but it also is within the purview of the OIG. And we don't have any say-so as to what they do until they finish their report. To my knowledge, they've not completed that report.
Well, there were 4 committees, as you told us here, that requested preservation of those Secret Service communications, and they specifically said including electronic communications. And then the Secret Service proceeds to migrate the phones to a different carrier and destroy the phones that were in their possession. Part of this migration, at least part of this migration, happened while Secretary Mayorkas was in charge of the DHS, which is what the Secret Service is part of and reports to. This is concerning to me. I don't know if I would have drafted the same articles of impeachment that we see here today. I think if you gave 435 people the job, you get 435 answers. But one of the things that concerns me greatly is here we had on January 6th, what we are being told are by the FBI and the ATF, viable bombs within just feet of the incoming vice president, first African-American female vice president in the history of this country, is within feet of a bomb, a viable bomb, for over an hour. The Secret Service takes forever to respond to it. And here we have Secretary Mayorkas, who was over all of this, not on that day, but I'm not as concerned about that day as I am now about the information we can't get and the information that he hasn't tried to get, as far as I can tell. And I've spoken to the OIG about this. There's apparently it's still the word of the Secret Service that this stuff is deleted and it ain't never coming back, because they didn't just delete the electronics, They destroyed the phones. This is concerning to me. I believe you were correct when you made this joint statement with Ms. Cheney, saying that there was a possible violation of the Federal Records Act. And when there is a possible violation of the Federal Records Act, in response to and in contravention of a Preservation Act from Congress, which is trying to investigate this very serious event, I think it's the most serious but least investigated event of January 6th. The fact that there was a pipe bomb just feet from the Vice President and the Secret Service. They didn't find it when they swept the area, apparently, and they didn't respond to it for minutes after they heard it was there. But I am concerned that Secretary Mayorkas is either through acts of commission or omission involved in this obstruction of Congress. You said it was a possible violation of the Federal Records Act. I agree with you. I think it is a violation of the Federal Records Act. I don't think we've had such a clear-cut case, and I don't think we've had such a clear-cut case of obstruction. So I think we owe it to the people to get to the bottom of this. Secretary Mayorkas is no help. He's still stymieing the OIG, still claiming that there's no way that you could get these records, these communications. And I think it's a very serious charge. And I would have included it, frankly, myself. We sit here and we ask these questions in these hearings, and they say, oh, Congressman, that's a subject of an ongoing investigation. We cannot answer your question. But when they say that to the OIG, we have another problem. These are the people that are set up to oversee what we're supposed to not be privy to, although I would argue that we should be able to get that too. And I believe that your committee and the other committees, of which there were 4 who asked for these records, were within their rights and obligations to the American people to get those Secret Service cell phone texts, but they apparently don't exist anymore. And they disappeared when Mayorkas was Secretary of Department of Homeland Security. I've got a real problem with that. Do you want to say anything before I conclude, Mr. Thompson?
Well, I put it to you like that. Chairman Green has subpoena power with our committee. If he wants to look into that, I'll support it.
Are you concerned about the lackadaisical attitude of the secret, or maybe you haven't seen the video? Have you seen the video of this discovery of the second pipe bomb?
No. Let me just say, a lot of what you've said here today, I have not been privy to, but I am of the opinion that if the chairman wants to look into that, you convince him to issue the subpoena, I'll go with him.
If I would like to show you that video at some point. I'm surprised your committee did not find it. I mean, there were 2 bombs that day, and according to FBI and ATF and Capitol Police, they were operable, viable bombs. One of them was just feet from Kamala Harris, who was going to become the Vice President of the United States. And the Secret Service sat there in their patrol car. It looks to me like they finished eating their lunch before they got out to look at it. And then it was 10 minutes. This is all on video. 10 minutes before they got Kamala Harris out of there. And again, it is Secretary Mayorkas who oversaw the production of these documents, these texts, which were never produced. And that's a real problem for me. With that, I yield back.
Thank you. Gentleman from Colorado is recognized for whatever questions he has for the panel.
I thank the chairman. First, let me just say I'll thank the gentleman.
I thank the chairman. I'm troubled here by your new rule defining what a firearms dealer is or engaged in the business of selling firearms. Isn't the purpose of it, or won't the result be that more people will be defined as being engaged in the business of selling firearms?
The purpose of the rule is to effectuate Congress's definition. Congress expanded the definition 2 years ago, in the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act.
What's the result going to be?
The result is going to be, I hope, increased compliance with Congress's statute.
The result is going to be subjecting more American citizens to the treatment that Mr. Malinowski unfortunately received from our federal government, which is you want to get more warrants to serve these no-knock raids on people who have not been convicted of anything, yet may be convicted on their doorstep to death. I want to address something in your rule here. I did find one thing that I think is sort of helpful, and I hope the other side of the aisle will read this. I want to give you time to look at this. The department, that would be the ATF, correct, in your rule?
I don't know what is this from the?
Yeah, this is from your rule.
The department refers to the Department of Justice.
Okay. The department also notes that the term gun show loophole is a misnomer in that there is no statutory exemption under the Gun Control Act for unlicensed persons to engage in the business of dealing in firearms at a gun show or at any other venue. I hope the other side of the aisle, this is the one useful thing that I found in 16-page rule and hundreds of pages of explanation, is to show people that there is no gun show loophole. Do you agree with the department and with your own rule here?
I agree that Congress never said, and has never said, and hasn't said now, didn't say before this, that somebody who is engaged in the business, those are the words there, can do that without a license depending on where they sit. But people have encouraged the perception, and we have seen an increased level of non-compliance among people who are either intentionally or otherwise breaking Congress's statute.
The only people encouraging this perception is the left side of the aisle in the media. There is no gun show loophole, and I'm glad you finally admitted that. Now I want to get to something else.
I've said that publicly, and there never was.
Okay, thank you. I want to get to something else in your opening statement, and maybe you want to read it back if it's written down. Can you tell me the fact that you were expressing or claimed that there are more that firearms are leading cause of death for children? What were your specific words in your testimony?
I'd have to look at my testimony.
Can you look at it?
I think it's children and youth, and it's in my longer statement that's in the record. Obviously, I'm summarizing a statement as the chair asked me to do. So it's in my longer statement, which has been entered into the record. I don't have it in front of me.
Can you define a child and youth?
There's child and youth. There's a statistical study that is the source of that, and we can get that to you. I don't know the specific site sitting here. We'll be glad to get that to you.
Yeah, the statistical study, according to news reports and Snopes, as Mr. Nails referred to, excludes infants under the age of 1 and includes 18 and 19-year-olds. Is that true?
I don't know. I mean, honestly.
You don't know your own statistic?
No, I don't know. Honestly,
why
isn't
would that
any
be your
killing of
testimony to
children
Congress?
unacceptable?
Any killing of any person is unacceptable, except in self-defense. Are you including if a 17 or 18 or 19-year-old gang member came to a person's door and tried to attack them, that was self-defense? Are you including that in your statistic?
Congressman, firearms violence is a huge...
Yeah. No, I'm not going to let you make your public service statement. I want you to defend your sworn testimony. Are you claiming that 18 and 19-year-olds are children in your statistic?
And again, you have my statement.
Yeah, I have it. I'm asking you to explain it. Here's my other question. How many 18-year-olds who've committed a gun crime have you suggested be prosecuted as a minor?
We are a law enforcement agency. We're not the prosecutors.
Okay.
And in the federal system,
how many have you served? How many have you gone after? Okay.
The federal, respectfully,
18-year-olds.
we investigate crimes shoulder to shoulder with local law enforcement.
Are 18-year-olds children or are they adults?
Each state has its own
Under the
rules
gun laws.
as to when juveniles are prosecuted.
Federal gun
Federal
laws.
laws, as you may know, federal laws with respect to the prosecution of juveniles are exceedingly difficult. And you are correct that prosecution of juveniles, if you're implying this as adults, is rare in the federal system.
Here's the reality.
And juvenile crime,
reclaiming my time.
crime is an increasing problem.
The gentleman from California.
Reclaiming my time, Look, you're including in your statistic, whether you know it or not, 18 and 19-year-olds, but you would never claim that those are minors in the context of gun prosecutions. And the only way you can get the number of deaths attributable to firearms above other causes is by excluding under the age of 1 and including 18 and 19-year-olds, particularly gang members, and including self-defense. So with that, I yield back.
Someone yields back. The 5-minute rule. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Alabama, Mr. Moore.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll yield to the gentleman from Kentucky, Mr. Massie.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. Mr. Dettelbach, in February, Chairman Biggs and I sent you a letter concerning the pipe bombs that were discovered on January 6th. These were pipe bombs from over 3 years ago, and the investigation surrounding it. After months without a response, day before yesterday, your department finally gave us a non-response. To be clear, the response was wholly inadequate and borders on showing contempt for Congress. To quote from the letter, this investigation remains ongoing. Accordingly, pursuant to longstanding Department of Justice policy, ATF cannot provide details. It goes on. This is about the safety of Congress. These bombs were a couple blocks from here, yet you refuse to answer questions about them. If you don't have contempt for us, I'll give you an opportunity to respond to some of my questions here today. Are you willing to answer those questions today?
I'm willing to try within the rules, which longstanding rules. I've been in 5 administrations at the Department of Justice, Democrat and Republican. And longstanding policy of the Department of Justice in both types of administration, on both sides, has been we do not comment on pending investigations.
Right. That's a policy. It's not been through some kind of rulemaking. That's a policy, and you can say that to the media, but you can't say it to Congress. We created your department. How many ATF personnel were on the Capitol premises on January 6, 2021?
Again, I don't believe I can answer specific questions about the investigation. I know that may not relate to the investigation. So I know that I wasn't here during that period. That predated my time on January 6th, the January 6th attacks. So I know there were some ATF agents who were called to help protect members of Congress. I don't know how many.
Well, that's not an acceptable answer. We've asked you this months ago, and you just send us a letter saying you can't answer that. Yet, according to a FOIA report obtained by Judicial Watch, there were 19 people here. So for you to say you don't know or you can't tell us is ludicrous. I mean, these are subject to FOIA reports.
Congress, I'm happy to also get back to you with information. If I don't remember all the numbers at the tip of my fingers, I'm sorry about that.
Are you willing to confirm that the pipe bombs planted at the Capitol Hill Club and the DNC on January 6th couldn't have gone off with the 60-minute kitchen timer if they were placed the day before?
Respectfully, Congressman, I do believe that this does go into the area of the investigation, which is ATF is supporting. FBI is leading that investigation, and I cannot comment on
We're 3 years into it. Who was the on-scene incident commander for the ATF on January 6th?
Again, if you're asking about the scene of the investigation at the headquarters, again,
You're not going to tell us who the incident commander was?
I don't know. I'm telling you, if that relates to the scene not here at the Capitol building where we were protecting congresspeople from attack, but to the other investigation scene, we can try to get back to you, but I will tell you, if it relates to a pending investigation, we won't be able to comment.
Does the ATF provide training to U.S. Capitol Police on explosive detection, detonation, disarming, or conduct, or simulation training exercises with U.S. Capitol Police?
We provide, the National Center for Explosives Training and Research in Huntsville, Alabama, provides training to numerous different law enforcement agencies. I would not be surprised if Capitol Police were one of them. I don't know about the training regimen. People are going down there all the time to get training.
Were the 2 pipe bombs on January 6th part of a training exercise?
I cannot comment on a pending investigation, but if...
Okay, well then I don't need to hear what...
In general, I would say to that, I think if law enforcement knows that something is part of some sort of a law enforcement exercise, they wouldn't be conducting that long of an investigation in general, but I don't...
In my last remaining seconds, I want to show you a video of something that you said on 60 Minutes.
And we depend on firearms dealers many of whom are our first line of defense, who will pick up the phone and help us and try to interdict this. And for those who aren't doing that, I hope and expect that as Americans, we will all do that. But those who aren't, if somebody comes into your store in a border state and plunks down $12,000 cash money for one of these things, so that there's no credit card trail, my word, we hope that people will help us as Americans and continue to help us and not make that sale.
Are you aware that it's illegal for you to create a registry of gun owners in the United States?
I am.
And are you insinuating here that somebody can't buy a firearm with cash?
No.
So why should a dealer call you if somebody's going through a background check and tell you that somebody is using cash?
We run a program called Don't Lie for the Other Guy, along with the National Shooting Sports Foundation. And there are indicia of straw purchasing matters where there are warning signs where people can contact us. And firearms dealers who are law-abiding business owners, and the majority are, I want to say that again here, they frequently contact us, especially on the southwest border, because cartels are using straw purchases to arm themselves with the kind of weaponry that results in death and destruction and the danger to Americans and law enforcement.
We're concerned because banks are keeping these records and giving them to the government without a legal process, and I yield back.
Without objection?
The question presented is whether private citizen Jack Smith lacks authority to represent the United States. I also ask unanimous consent to submit for the record an article titled, "Was it legal to appoint Jack Smith in the first place?" This is a heritage publication.
Without objection?
I want to start by reading you the appointment clause of the Constitution. Article 2, Section 2, Clause 6 states, "The President shall nominate and by and with the advice and consent of the Senate shall appoint ambassadors, other public ministers and consuls, judges of the Supreme Court, and all other officers of the United States, whose appointments are not herein otherwise provided for, and which shall be established by law." Are U.S. attorneys nominated by the President and confirmed by the Senate according to this appointments clause?
They are appointed by the President and confirmed by the Senate.
Wouldn't you agree that U.S. attorneys are held to the appointments clause because they are delegated some part of the sovereign power of the United States, such as the ability to make indictments and charge individuals with crimes?
I would say that those are not the reasons why, and a court has already ruled on the question of whether special counsels are subject to the appointments clause in the Mueller case, and ruled that they were not. Was Jack Smith nominated by President Biden or confirmed by the U.S. Senate? Look, you're asking me about a case again. Motions filed. This
is a simple question.
No, I'm not.
Was Jack Smith nominated by President Biden?
No, he was not.
Was he confirmed by the Senate?
No, he was not.
When was the special counsel statute passed?
There is no special counsel statute. There was an independent counsel statute that was expired.
So it expired. So what gives you the authority to appoint a special counsel? You've created an office in the U.S. government that does not exist without authorization from Congress.
There are regulations under which the Attorney General appoints special counsel. They've been in effect for 30 years, maybe longer, under both parties. The matter that you're talking about whether somebody can have an employee of the Justice Department serve as special counsel has been adjudicated.
You appealed. Let me interrupt for a second, because you appealed to a regulation, a rule, whereas the Constitution says shall be established by law.
Yeah, the statutes.
Right, the statute. But you referred to a regulation, not to U.S. code.
May I answer? The regulation cites the two U.S. Code provisions that permit the Attorney General's appointment. Attorney General Barr cited to the same ones.
Are you familiar?
Even Attorney General Meese did that.
All right. Are you familiar with former Attorney General Meese's amicus brief?
No.
You're not?
I know that he's filed one because I read it in the newspapers, but otherwise I'm not familiar with it. But
well, he raises some good questions that I agree with in there. It seems like you've created an office that would require an act of Congress, yet there's not an act of Congress that authorizes that. And even if it didn't require an act of Congress, and you've already admitted it, there was no act of Congress that established this office, it would still require, according to the Constitution, a nomination by the president and confirmation by the Senate. I want to move on to January 6th. Is it accurate to say that the DOJ is on pace to arrest roughly one protester a day in 2024, nearly 3 years after the incident?
I don't know what the pace is. The job is to arrest and bring to justice people who are criminally responsible, and as they are found, they will be arrested.
Is your office preparing to drop charges against more than 340 January 6thers charged with 1512C2 and release dozens from prison on that count if the Supreme Court this month reverses how your department has used that statute against them?
We respect the Supreme Court. Whatever the court rules, we will act appropriately.
So you'll have to drop the charges if the Supreme Court says that you did that wrongfully.
I'm not going to answer hypotheticals. We'll wait and see what the Supreme Court says.
What do you say in response to D.C. Appellate Court overturning 2 excessive sentencing requests sought by your office?
I say that is the United States system of justice working. If people think that they have inappropriate sentences, they can appeal their sentences. That's the way our system works, and we respect the results.
So you've refused to answer questions before us, including my questions about January 6th on multiple occasions here in this committee, but the Inspector General is preparing a report. Are you in receipt of that report yet? He's promised to examine the role and activity of DOJ and its components in preparing for and responding to the events at the U.S. Capitol. Are you in receipt of that?
I'm not in receipt of any report. You'll have to ask the Inspector General.
Isn't it true that it will go to you before it's released for review?
I don't know about it will not go to me for review. The Inspector General is independent. I hope to see it before, but that's up to the Inspector General. Let me just remind you, I was not the Attorney General on January 6th.
Do we have your commitment to release that as soon as you see it?
The determination of the release of Inspector General reports is up to the Inspector General. We give them independence. Congress demands that we give them independence.
My time has expired, but we have your commitment not to slow down the release of that from the Inspector General.
Our Inspector General is a very independent person. There's no way I could stop him from doing what the law requires.
I yield back.
And I would certainly never do that.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from California is recognized.
I now recognize myself for 5 minutes. Trying to understand what goes into an ESG score. Mr. Bienvenu, are you aware that last year S&P Global gave Tesla an ESG rating of 37 out of 100, while at the same time giving Philip Morris a rating of 84 out of 100? You familiar with that?
I'm not aware of that. I will tell you that for us, ESG ratings are part of the mosaic in the investment decision that we make, because it's critical for us that we consider all of those topics.
So you would consider this in your investments, these ESG ratings?
We consider every information that we can get in our investments. More information.
So shouldn't you
is better
know
for an
what's
investor.
behind the fact that Tesla got less than 40 and a tobacco company got more than 80? Would that cause you to invest in the tobacco company over an electric car company?
As I said, every investment decision we make is a mosaic of hundreds and thousands of factors.
But you're testifying today, you have no idea how Tesla got half the score that a tobacco company got?
As I
Do you
said
know what goes into these ratings?
As I said previously, we own 10,000 companies, and each one has.
Do you own Tesla or Philip Morris?
We own Tesla.
Do you have any Philip Morris?
We do not have any Philip Morris.
Okay. Well, I wish you could explain to us today why Tesla has an ESG rating of 37. Philip Morris had 84 last year. Attorney General Ellison, if 3 airline companies got together and decided, let's say the management of the airline companies, and decided to reduce flights or to get rid of their frequent flyer program, would that be collusion? Would you pursue that?
Well, let me tell you, there's a lot of things that go into any antitrust case, and so just to answer your question with only what you've asked, I'd say I need to investigate more, but just on the bare bones of what you asked, it would get our interest.
Will get your interest. What if instead of the companies, their investors did this, or a shell company that all 3 of the airlines were a part of suggested to all 3 companies that they should reduce flights?
Well, there I can't go with you, because the only thing that, I mean, if you're talking about the folks assembled here and other groups that give information to companies, those companies are making independent decisions, and making decisions in the interests of the people who they represent, whether they be shareholders or whether they be pension fund beneficiaries.
I'm glad in the first instance it would get your interest up, because that's why we're having the hearing here. We see evidence that these group of investors has conspired, collaborated, colluded, convened, whatever you want to call it. It's still pretty much the same thing, to reduce the outputs of their companies or the companies that they target. And, you know, Ms. Lubber, you said that mainly what you all advocate for is disclosure, but don't you also try to get the companies to do things?
We're interested in the companies taking positions that allow them to be strong and profitable over the short, medium, and long term. And every discussion, whether it's with an auto company, looks at where's the market going as it relates to EVs, not just combustion engine vehicles.
Well, here's the problem we have. What is demand management? Does somebody want to tell me what demand management is? Because nobody jumped on that. So, you know, it's in all of your documents, demand management. It's kind of the go-to thing to reduce. When you discover that the technology isn't there yet to reduce the emissions and keep the production the same, you suggest in the documents that the companies, here's a document called Investor Actions to Align the Aviation Sector with the IEAS 1.5 degree decarbonization pathway. It suggests that the aviation companies themselves could manage demand by raising their prices. Now, the problem here is that this is coordination. You guys are putting these documents together, you're sending them to everybody, you're collaborating on the documents, and then you're going to the companies that you've invested in and saying you should do this. And we know the technology's not there, but here's some of the suggestions for the airline companies: keeping business travel to 2019 levels, capping long-haul flights for leisure at 2019 levels, reducing total flights by 12%. These are in the documents that you send to your members. And again, you call it demand management. What I would say is that if we saw anybody else doing this for any other reason, the fact that you think you have a noble reason isn't enough to get you around the law. It's not. Because what you're doing ends up raising prices, reducing production, and it's not good for society, and it's not, in many cases, not good for the firms you're investing in. And that's why we're having this hearing today. And I see that my time has expired. Attorney General Ellison, I understand you need to leave.
Unfortunately.
I appreciate you coming. You probably never want to come back here again, I would say. But congratulations on your new job, and thank you for participating today.
May I just thank you, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member, for your hospitality today, and I am always happy to help advance the legislative process in whatever way I can. So thank you very much.
We appreciate your time. And if the other witnesses will stay, that would be good, because we have a few more folks who want to ask questions. Now, let's see, we got the gentleman from Vermont.
Try to go to people in the order in which they can ask questions, so don't be surprised when it skips around on both sides. With that, we go to the gentleman from Kentucky, Mr. Massie.
I thank the chairman. Ms. Hairston, Mr. Corte, and Professor Contreras, you all mentioned this thing called public interest. Do any of you want to explain to me what public interest is in the context of deciding a patent dispute? Ms. Hairston, what do you mean by public interest, that the ITC should consider public interest?
Thank you for the question, Congressman Massie. We would say that in the public interest means that it is for the 4 factors that have been articulated in the ITC statute in terms of public health and welfare, competitive conditions, and other factors should be considered when looking at the public interest, that it should not be left solely to the ITC to determine that potentially infringing or non-infringing goods would constitute a violation of public interest.
Mr. Corte, how would you describe public interest consideration that you've proposed?
Thank you, Congressman. So public interest should be tied to the statutory purpose of the International Trade Commission, which is to protect American domestic markets. the ITC should not be taking any action, let alone an exclusion order, if it's damaging American industry. And that should be the sort of analysis the ITC should do under Section 337. That analysis should include what's already in the statute, in addition to other requirements like the impact on American workers, American factories, and the American industry at large.
Ms. Hairston, what did, one of the remedies you said is if there's less than 10% of the product that's infringing or deemed to be infringing, assumed to be infringing, that you should still be able to import that product. Is that true?
Yes, Congressman Massey, that is a number that the 10% threshold is something that we suggested in terms of to invite conversation and dialogue. But yes, at 10% of the overall product is attributable to the allegedly infringing product, we believe an exclusion order should not be issued.
Okay, let me just say something. I'm appalled that you guys are here testifying like this. This is shameless. You're like here trying to divvy up the goods of the American inventor. What you're saying is that if you're only stealing 10% of the product, let us keep importing it. Let us just keep stealing it, as long as the theft is at a low enough level. And then this public interest notion. This is a communist term. What you are saying is it may be in the public interest to let somebody keep infringing. And the Constitution guarantees the right to exclude somebody from infringing. It doesn't say that the government can come in and figure out what a fair price to pay is for that infringement. Yet that is what all three of you, even you, Professor, are suggesting with this term, public interest, because we've seen it used in the past. And I am just appalled that you have no shame in saying that you should be able to steal product from an inventor in the United States, have it manufactured overseas in China, import that as a knockoff, and if you're only stealing 10% of the idea. Professor Doan, Professor Contreras suggested, it seemed like that this ITC concept is archaic, that's no longer needed, that's been supplanted by other means. But then I hear you say, well, Congress has actually updated it. Mr. Corte said that the intent of Congress, needs to be clarified. The intent of Congress is in the Constitution. We don't want you stealing things, getting them made overseas, ripping off American inventors, and then bringing it in here and selling cheap knockoffs to Americans. They're faulty. Professor Doan, is the ITC obsolete?
Absolutely not, Congressman. As I said, it was specifically amended for the purpose of at least small innovators in 1988 and 1994 to make it easier for small inventors, universities to bring these cases. And I think that's an important task of the commission.
Let me give you an example of whose hand's been caught in the cookie jar here. Apple saw this pulse oximeter technology, said, oh, let's put that in an Apple Watch. They stole the idea, stole all the people that developed it from the original company that was making these in the United States, went to China, had this cheap crap made, and tried to bring it in, and the ITC said you're infringing. Are you aware of this case, Professor Dunn?
Yes, sir, I am.
And that seems like that's the way this should work. When you got a big corporation ripping off a smaller corporation and trying to get the crap made over in China instead of made here, doesn't the ITC have a role to play there, Professor Dunn?
I think that is specifically one of the important reasons for the commission, particularly in the circumstance of a small inventor like a small innovation company like Massimo going up against a large importer of product, to be able to, after years of litigation, they've been in litigation for, I believe, almost 10 years in district courts, and the only relief they've been able to obtain is this ITC exclusion order.
Thank you. I yield back.
Thank you.
And now I want to talk about another possible assassination attempt, and I'll start by showing a video of President Biden, and this is from recently. This is in the last month, if we can play that.
Gallows erected to hang the Vice President, Mike Pence. I think it's fair to say it's one of the darkest days in the history of America.
Okay, and he's referring to January 6th. Were there gallows erected to hang Mike Pence, as the president says here?
I'm not aware of any physical gallows. I can't remember whether, from a demonstration perspective, there may not have been some kind of replica or symbol of something like that.
That's my impression. Can we show Can you raise that up so you can see it? It looks like there was some kind of prop that was built. The construction doesn't look like it lends itself to actually hanging somebody. It's more of a prop, I think, as you suggested, that was erected on January 6th. But if the president were correct, that these gallows were erected to hang Mike Pence, that would be a very serious allegation, wouldn't it?
I would take it very seriously, yes.
Has anybody been arrested, or do you have any leads in conjunction with the erection of this gallows? We had a picture here on the screen, if you can show it again. It was just up there. There's an individual here who's seen on near these gallows. Has he been arrested? Have you identified this person?
You know, I don't know that I could speak to this specific person or the gallows that are pictured on the image. You know, we have had, I think, 850 people who have pled guilty to federal crimes related to January 6th, and I think, you know, another 180, I think it is, convicted at trials. So I can't be sure.
And some of them merely for going into the Capitol, but here the president suggests that individual intended to hang Vice President Pence, which seems like kind of a wild claim myself, given the construction of those gallows. But if we are to take him seriously, or even if we aren't, let me just finish by saying this. If you have no leads, or you're not sure if anybody who erected those gallows was arrested or is being investigated, you know, were there any confidential human sources involved from the FBI or any other agency in the erection of that prop, those gallows?
I'm not aware of anything like that.
All right. Thank you. I yield back.
Gentlemen, good to have Mr. Massie back with us today. Some of us had a chance to go to Kentucky over the last few weeks and visit with Thomas and his family and hear all kinds of wonderful stories about Rhonda. Amazing, amazing lady, gentle spirit, and we're glad to have Mr. Massie back with us. And next 5 minutes belong to you, Congressman.
Thank you, Chairman. Director Wray, how many counter snipers were present at the rally that day, and which of the counter snipers took the shot that took out the would-be assassin?
I don't have the number of counter snipers. I know it was a Secret Service counter sniper who took the shot that eliminated the shooter. We've conducted a number of interviews, including of him.
So was it one of the two that we see in the videos on top of the roof, or was it a different location that was shot?
I'm afraid I don't have that at my fingertips here.
Okay. You mentioned that the would-be assassin bought a 5-foot ladder. You have a credit card evidence of that. But it looks like on the scene there was a larger ladder that he might have used. Do you know which ladder he used to get to the roof? And do you have possession of that 5-foot ladder and the other ladder? And do you know how the taller ladder got to the scene?
So this whole business about the ladder is something we're drilling into more. We do have possession of the 5-foot ladder that he purchased close in time to his attempted assassination. That we've traced the purchase of that ladder from a receipt, a bloodied receipt that he had on him at the time his body was recovered on the roof. We do not yet know for sure how exactly he got up on the roof. We're looking at, you know, various forensic pieces to try to kind of piece that together. So more to come on that.
Do you know where the 5-foot ladder was found or retrieved? Was it near the roof, or was it still in his vehicle?
Neither. I don't have it in front of me, but I know that it was not. I know that it was not on scene, and I know that it was not in his vehicle. But we can circle back to you and get to that.
Is there any evidence at all that he may have been in contact with somebody else before this occurred that may have had any prior knowledge or may have helped him plan this event?
Well, needless to say, that is a question that we're intensely focused on, because that would obviously be incredibly meaningful. So far, underline, so far, we have not found any evidence of any accomplices or co-conspirators, foreign or domestic.
And you're using geolocation data to see if his cell phone was near another cell phone, I presume?
Right, we're doing lots of different kinds of cellular analysis, geolocation stuff, looking at his accounts. He, from everything we've seen, which is consistent with what we've learned in interviews, a lot of people describe him as a loner. That does kind of fit with what we're seeing in his devices. His list of contacts, for example, is very short, compared to what you would normally see from most people. So it doesn't appear to be a whole lot of interaction between him, face-to-face or digital with a lot of people.
Okay, thank you.
That doesn't mean there's not any, and that's why we're drilling into. We're trying to talk to anybody who's had any engagement with him whatsoever, digital, in person, classmates, coworkers,
Right.
et cetera.
Appreciate that. And now I want to talk about another. Inspector General Horowitz, over the past 3 years, I've questioned FBI Director Wray and Attorney General Merrick Garland about the federal assets, such as confidential human sources that were present on January 6th at the Capitol. And they have continuously stonewalled me. We've got no answers whatsoever about this from them. Now, you announced that you were going to do a review of the DOJ response and preparation, mainly preparation, I think, for January 6th. When did you start that review? When did you announce that review?
We announced it in 2021, but we ended up pausing it because of the ongoing criminal cases consistent with how we perform our work. We reinitiated it last year, and I'm in the process of reviewing a draft of the report.
So 3.5 years ago, it was announced that you'd be doing this review, and we still don't have the review, do we?
No, as I said, the reason is we paused the review because of the ongoing criminal work that would, consistent with our practice, we don't interfere with ongoing criminal investigations.
So,
We seek
but
not
now
to.
that you've restarted it, do you have evidence of the number of confidential human sources that were operating on the Capitol grounds on January 6th?
Our report will include the information in that regard.
Can you tell us today how many there were? Were there more than 100?
I'm not in a position to say that, both because it's in draft form and we have not gone through the classification review. And so I need to be careful on what I
So
say.
we're 4 years in. The reason to do these reports, I think, is so we don't make this, if there were any mistakes, not to make the same mistakes again, but we are just weeks away from an inauguration. We're 4 years, almost 4 years into this report. When is it going to be released?
It's certainly my hope and expectation, although I don't control this entirely because it has to go through a classification review, but certainly in the next couple of months is my hope.
Do you think, is there any consideration for the election about the release of this report? Would you delay it in order to not release it right before the election?
At this point, given the process that has to play out in terms of classification review and all of that, I'm not making any, I don't have to make any judgment about that. We're still, that still has to go on. Just to give you a sense of it, when I did the Pfizer review.
You're saying it's not even going to be done in time before the election?
It doesn't, I doubt it would be done in time for the election.
Is it going to be done before the inauguration?
That is certainly my hope. And
It's your hope. We're 4 years into it, and we know what we do know is you're going to expose that there were confidential human sources at the Capitol. Can you tell us today how many went into the Capitol?
I'll have that information in the report. I'm not able to speak to information in there, both because it's in draft and we get a response from the department and the FBI,
Okay.
but also because I don't know yet what's classified and not classified.
So if they broke the law, if they went into the Capitol, which we pretty much know there were confidential human sources who went into the Capitol and right there alongside of everybody else, wouldn't they need to follow DOJ CHS protocols? And do you know if those were followed?
They should follow CHS protocols, and again, we'll include that information in the report.
Do you know how many were reimbursed for travel?
As I sit here, I don't recall the number.
But I don't recall, or you won't tell us?
Well, and if I did know it, I wouldn't be in a position to tell you because we still have to go through.
We're 4 years
actual
into this.
accuracy
You're supposed to be the organization that goes and gets these answers when the FBI and the DOJ stonewall Congress. But I feel like You know, we're 4 years into this. We're not even going to get this information you're telling us now before the election, and maybe not even before the next inauguration. How would we make any corrections or without that information? I want to move on to something else. We've got FBI's failed investigation of the January 6th pipe bomb. Are you looking into that at all?
We've had discussion, I know, Congressman, about it, and we have followed up, and I can speak to you about that.
I mean, they keep saying it's an ongoing investigation, but they've got no leads, no suspects. They've lost information. They've lost evidence. They can't find evidence. Secret Service deleted all of its texts on January 6th. Steve D'Antuono, the guy in charge of Washington, D.C. field office, says that the cell phone data that could have been used to find the bomber was corrupted. And now we just I found out from another inspector general, and I want to submit this for the record.
Objection.
Yeah. I asked him, do you have the footage, the video footage, does the FBI have the video footage of the DNC on January 6th? And he tells me when he asked the FBI for the video footage, they don't even have video footage of the DNC that we know was created on January 6th. It's almost, it's almost as if they don't want to know. Can you rule out that there were any confidential human sources involved in the whole pipe bomb thing on January 6th?
I'd have to go back, Congressman, and refresh myself on what information we've gathered to date on that. I don't know as I sit here.
Okay, that would be a huge revelation.
But I'm happy to come.
I think we should get that and get it public before the election. I yield back.
Gentleman is back. I'm just struck by the irony, the fact that the very email that they went after Mr. Allen about was on this subject, and we're not going to get an answer to it until after the election, potentially after the inauguration. I find the irony astounding. And it's not Mr. Horowitz's fault. It's the folks at the Justice Department who are taking their time with this report. I appreciate the gentleman's question. Now yield to the gentleman